for joining us for our new talk series with Desert Passion. I'm so excited to hear all about your story and hear more about your portraiture business. I wanted to let some people know about how awesome you are for those of you that, or for those who will be watching that don't know you. I first met Regina at a little women's entrepreneur meetup group, and it was pretty apparent that she was already someone that I wanted to get to know more. She's a total badass, and she runs a really awesome portraiture photography business called Badass Women Photos, and it's all about she does a really good job of taking our role as a photographer and doing even more with it, meaning helping people with their self-confidence, helping people with body image, helping people with self-love. And it's so cool to be able to do that through portraiture and photographs. So I'm so excited to hear more about that and how you're actually impacting people's lives through your photography. So first, I want to get back into your background story because I don't actually know much about it, about how you started to get into photography, what drew you to it. So if you can tell us a little bit about, how how it got started for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And I got a really good flashback to our networking meetings. I can't wait till we all meet again and see what we all did during this shelter-in-place time.
Yes, absolutely.
So how I got started, to be honest, it's like anything, right? Like an interesting journey that's hard to pinpoint, like what the exact steps were. But I first picked up a camera at summer camp when I was about 13, I think, 12 or 13. I went to summer camp with my cousin, and one of the classes offered was film photography. So we worked in a dark room, developed a bunch of black and white photographs, and I was really at that point, I thought, wow, wouldn't it be cool to be a photographer? Like, that's really cool. Except I grew up in, I guess, the culture many of us probably do, where, or at least this was a story I heard from adults around me, where art was not a career, and like if you wanted to seriously make it or make money, like you wouldn't be an artist, and photography was an art. So I remember, like, ever since I was little, feeling like, but that's what I really feel like doing, and deciding to go to business school instead. So I got my undergrad in business, and the whole time in business school, I mean, really grateful that I did it. I loved it, and I think that that's one of the things that helps me run my own business today. And at the same time, I was so much more present in like my art electives and my extracurricular activities that involved more meeting with people one-on-one, giving back to my community, creating stuff. So I kind of like took my own route and also studied art on my own in a way. And then fast forward to grad school, I wanted to do something more creative. So I got into a school for advertising. It was an art school, but it was still like somewhat business focused. I ended up in an advertising agency. It was like a great job. And on paper, it was like, oh, you made it, And still I was lacking that feeling of like I was really impacting people. I was working behind a screen and with a big team and for big companies. So it just felt like me, what I have to share is not reaching any of these people out there, and I feel like that's the power of a lot of my work now. So I left that, didn't really know what I was going to do. And at the time I was doing freelance, designing logos and putting together websites for small businesses. And one of the people I was working with was working on a cookbook, and she was in a different city. So she sent me all the recipes and some photos, and I looked at the photos and I was like, yeah, no, like I'll take some new photos for you. So that's kind of when I started picking up my camera again and just taking it everywhere and realizing how much joy it brought me. Not only, I mean, I was already noticing all the beauty around me, but to capture it. And in that time of like not really knowing what I was going to do, it just felt safe to have my camera with me, like to connect with people and to create things. It was like my easiest way to create something or get a message across. So fast forward a few months or years, yeah, probably years, and I was redoing my website where I had like all sorts of photography. I had my food photography in there. I had still life, some product stuff, some portraits. And I sat down to like redo the page, and I realized that at the end, it like all the photos had something in common. And they were all of badass women. And I'm like, oh, look, this is what I like to photograph. And the thing is, it wasn't just the photos themselves, it was the connection that we had had during the session. So it was the exchanging of the energy and the, like when I looked at those photos, it was like, oh my gosh, that was such a fun, amazing time. Like, and you can see that through the photos. So I wanted that to be highlighted on my website. So it just became clear, like, oh, this is what I do. I provide this safe space and fun space for people to just express themselves freely and feel like they have permission to do that. I would say I'm a little bit weird in a way where like people meet me and they might be like, oh, wait, you do that in public? Or like, you don't care about looking this way or that way? And it's like, like, who cares? Let's just be ourselves. So I think that that part about me gives people permission to say like, oh, I can be my weird self too, or what someone else might consider weird, which is just like myself. So, ever since 2015, I would say that is when Badass Women Photos started. And ever since then, I've been connecting with people, not just women, men as well, and everyone all across the board. So, yeah.
That's awesome. You did a really good job of describing what I like to call finding our voice in photography. And I think, a lot of us start where you started, where it's kind of like shooting a little bit of everything, dabbling here, dabbling there. But really honing in on what you're truly passionate about, I think is so important for not only getting more enjoyment out of your work, but being able to better, contribute your true skills and passion to what you do. And really, like, that's when you become a professional photographer, I feel like, and you start to stand apart because people recognize you for that type of work. And I think people really recognize you as Badass Women Photos. This is what she does, So that's really cool to hear your story and kind of how you, came to that. And I can totally relate to the whole, oh, you're not going to make it in this art career. I actually started myself, same thing, started out in writing and then photography. And I was like, oh, I'm never going to, people literally tell you, you're not going to make any money doing this, which is sad, and that's part of what Desert Passion is about too, is trying to encourage people to still follow those passions, even when the world is saying, oh, this is pointless, don't waste your time on this. And that's why I want to talk to people like you, who are great examples that you actually can do this and make it a reality and make it your career, which is so, so cool. So I want to hear a little bit more about your specific process with working with people in portraiture. I think that a lot of people, specifically with doing portraits, struggle with, how do I direct people? How do I make people comfortable in front of the camera? Especially when they're not models and they're what we call, normal people or regular people who aren't trained in posing. How do we work with them so that we get the best pictures we can get?
Yeah, definitely. I hear my dog in the background, but he's not coming in. Sorry. So I think for me, actually, portraits are much easier. Portraits of one person, because that's the way I tend to connect anyway. A lot of people will look at me and they'll think like I'm an extrovert, but honestly, I'm quite an introvert. I prefer small, intimate gatherings. So for me, the one-on-one is pretty simple. And I think one of the reasons for that is just like the way that I live my life in general. Like, I really don't like small talk, and people will learn that from me as soon as they meet me. So I think that really invites people to open up if they feel comfortable. So the way that I like to start is I first send people a form and ask them a bunch of questions, and just kind of like some themes that are going on in their life and questions that will help them reflect on what they've got going on. Because a lot of times we think we want photos for one specific reason, but then we end up, for example, someone will reach out and be like, hey, I'm starting a new project, so I want new photos. And then once they do the self-reflection and start getting in the groove of the photo shoot, they're like, well, really, the reason I want this is because I've been going to therapy and like really learning about myself and like starting a new path in life. So it's just like much deeper than what we might think we want them for. And the self-reflection form is really helpful. And then also in there, I ask people how they prefer to ground, like before they're going to do something important. And I give people different options of movement, dance, breathing exercises, pulling cards, whatever it may be. So depending on what that person chooses, I'll do that. So a lot of times, especially in the mini portrait sessions, I do a lot of professional headshots also, and they're like back-to-back sessions at bigger companies. And even in those, we do a meditation. Like out of the 15 minutes that we have together, 5 minutes are meditation and then chatting and then getting to know each other. And then the photo shoot portion is probably like 3 or 4 minutes, but the whole work is getting someone to feel extremely comfortable. And it's hard to say exactly what does it, but there's always a point, whether it's like the conversation that we're having and ways in which we find to connect, whether we have something in common or something that we're interested about in each other. Yeah.
I totally agree with
flows.
that. Yeah. I've always thought that, using tactics such as breathing and yoga is really helpful. So it's really cool to hear more about your specific process. And I think you said it before about kind of how your own demeanor helps to, give other people permission to feel more comfortable, more confident. If you're feeling comfortable and confident, and grounded, that's how the people around you are going to feel. So do you also have a grounding practice yourself for when you're going into the photo session so that you're showing up as your most calm and confident person?
Yes. I would say like all of life is a grounding practice for me. For everything, whether I'm feeling really good or I'm feeling anxious, like it's all the thing. But definitely when I'm headed to a photo shoot, especially the days that I have a lot of back-to-back photo sessions, honestly, like when I was young, my dad would always tell me when I was going into a test or something difficult, he'd be like, just remember, like, let God work through you. So I really remind myself of that. Like, this is in the hands of God, whatever that may be to you, whether it's universe or just energy. So that I honestly, I practice that a lot. And then just my breathing. And I think, yeah, it's hard to say what exactly does it. But for me too, especially on those long days of a lot of shooting, the sessions with my clients of breathing really help me tap into my grounding as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to hear if you have any specific examples of a portrait session with one of your clients where you feel like it really helped, make a difference for them, maybe whether that's their own body image or their own confidence, where you felt like it's one of those moments where you're like, this is why I do the work I do,
So many.
That's a good thing.
That's the soul food, really. And I think that really is what keeps me going is seeing like, that we're all just walking each other home in this process. A few things that come to mind that I can think of specifically is someone that I had worked with worked with her probably 3 or 4 times, but one of the sessions, like I could kind of feel a little distance from her as we were getting ready to go to the session. And then we get there and first we had like a really long coffee because I could tell that that's what was needed. So we had a long coffee and like really took our time during this session. And we had a great time. We were like dancing in the park and got some amazing shots and she looked so joyous. So a few months afterwards, I got a note from her saying that morning she was actually feeling really, really down and depressed and like didn't want to go to the shoot because all these things come into your mind. I mean, they're probably already happening, but when you're going to be in front of the camera, if you're not used to being in front of the camera, all your stuff can come up, So she mentioned that she didn't even want to show up. She was probably going to cancel and something called her to show up. And she just said that whole experience was so transformative that, she took that energy with her and kept going for the rest of her days that she was having a hard time through. So that's one. And then there's been people that have gone through a lot of transformations, and not just physically, but also in themselves. And I think that's everything that shows in a photo, right? Like that's the glow of a photo, is how you're feeling on the inside, I truly believe. So they've gone through transformations, and I had this one woman look at just the thumbnail on my camera after we took like maybe 4 portraits, and she just started like crying in the room. This one was actually in studio, and she just started crying, and she's like, I have never seen myself this way. Even when I looked in the mirror this morning, like I didn't look this beautiful. So just moments like that. And I get that so much, where people are like, oh, I'm not photogenic. I'm sure you hear that all the time. I don't believe there's such a thing as not photogenic. We're all human and perfectly imperfectly human. So I get that a lot, where people say that, and then they'll look at their photo and they'll be like, this one lady was like, you're a witch, you're a camera witch. I'm like, thank you. And no, like, this is who you are. You're just shining into my lens right now. So yeah.
I think that's the beautiful thing about being a portrait photographer, and really the power we have to be able to reflect back to people their own beauty. And you know, it takes work to be able to do that and to really connect and show up for people in that way. And then that's, you know, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you today, to really you know, help others who are aspiring portrait photographers understand how amazing this work can be when you really start finding the ways to show up for people through photography to, you know, capture their inner beauty. And not only does that do wonders for your clients, but it also means that you get really amazing portraits through it. You know, you really have the true essence of these people showing up in your photographs, which is a really cool thing. So another thing I wanted to touch on, because I know you tend to do a lot of traveling for your photography, and I think there's a lot of people out there who are like, how do I do that? You know, it'd be really cool to be able to build up client bases in different areas and be able to be a little bit more free to where can I, you know, where can I go to shoot, and not just limited to my hometown. So can you talk a little bit about that? I know you travel back and forth. I know Arizona and I think San Francisco, not sure exactly where else, but I'd love to hear more about that.
Definitely. I think when I was thinking about this question, is the main thing I think has been just planting the seed from when I was a kid. Like, I remember planting the seed of like, whoa, it'd be really cool to be a photographer. And then also being like, and I want to travel to all these amazing cities and all this stuff. And I think that planting the seed and saying things out loud and really voicing our dreams is super important. And also, like, I feel like that's the catalyst to making things unfold. But the way that it did for me is I actually moved to San Francisco to go to grad school. And then that's where I started my photography career, Badass Women Photos. And so a lot of my client base was there. What was really interesting, though, is that I had a lot of clients when I was there. And at the same time, I still had a lot of availability. People would be like, I really want to shoot with you, maybe in a couple months. Or the shoot would get really close and then they would postpone or cancel. So anyway, I did build up client base there. But then when I moved to Arizona, just for personal reasons, I felt like I wanted to come back home to my roots and slow down a little bit too. So when I moved here, I was really sad to be leaving my client base out there. And to my surprise, I announced that I was going to go back for like a week, and my dates filled up like that. So like, scarcity mentality is very much alive in ourselves. So when I realized that, I thought, oh, well, maybe I can do both of these things. Like, I can keep seeing my clients over there and connect with my community here in Phoenix. So I started doing that. And then also, one of the people that I photographed through a personal photo shoot works for a really big company out in the Bay Area. So they brought me in as their company photographer and been working with them like every other month. And they also have offices in Seattle, which has allowed me to do more personal shoots in Seattle, because I go there for the company and then I can do personal shoots there as well. So I can't say how I would have done it without having, or like how I would have picked Seattle maybe without having that base of the larger company that is hiring me. But yeah, it just worked out that way. And then I have a lot of friends like in New York and different places that just keep saying, hey, come visit Mexico City, you know? So I'm not afraid to just like throw things out there and see what sticks. Like if I go to New York, just saying, hey, I'll be here, whoever wants photos, or a friend of a friend, and word of mouth also, you know,
Yeah.
that's seems to be the number one thing for me.
Yeah, totally. And I think I've seen from you that you've built up a really good web presence. It's really clear what your work is about, you know, when you go to your website or your social media. And I think that's really important. So I was wondering if you have any other advice for people starting out in portraiture in terms of their branding or building up their image, that sort of thing, because it seems like that's something that you've really honed in on really well. And I think personally that that is also what contributes to you being able to just go to another city and say, hey, I'm going to be here, and be able to schedule some client sessions, because people see your work and they just, you know, it's very clear what you do, and, you know, they just want to be able to have those same sessions with you that other people have had.
Definitely. So I think that one of the things was finding like that super, super niche. And some people, when I first decided, I'm just going to call it what it is, and it's badass women photos, so many people were like, but are you sure? Like, that's so limiting. That's so specific. This one friend of mine was like, are you sure you don't want to just do weddings? There's always going to be weddings. And I was like, excuse me, there are always going to be badass women. She was like, yeah, I guess so. So, yeah, at first it felt kind of scary to say this is exactly what I'm doing. But I feel that people see it and it's very obvious, like you either resonate with it or you don't. And it's like, you know, this is for me or it's not. So I think that that helped too. And especially having a little bit of a name that's like, whoa, that's almost like a word that's not very allowed. You know, like Google sometimes blocks my email address because the word badass is in it. So I think that that contributed to people resonating with my brand. And I don't know how the online presence honestly has been helpful, but I think that what I would say to someone that's starting in portrait photography and wondering how to get more comfortable with their clients or help them open up, self-portraiture for me has been like an insane teacher. At first, when I started doing portraits, I wasn't being in front of the camera myself either. So then when I would see people be like, oh, I'm so comfortable about the way that this side of my face looks or this looks and that looks, I'm like, no, you look great. Like, obviously you're you. But then I would get in front of the camera and I'd be like, whoa, this is what I look like from this angle. So I had to do a lot of work for myself through portraiture as well, like a lot of old stories, body image stuff, and just it's been such a great teacher for helping myself see myself in so many different ways, and being able to bring those lessons and also that perspective to my clients, I think is like one of the most important things. And one more thing I will say for anyone looking to start portrait photography also is don't get too caught up in like the mechanics of it. I think that that's all really important, like lighting and obviously focus, all the things. But for me, for example, one of the fears that I had when I was first starting, and I would tell one of my mentors this, and I was so afraid, I would just say like, you know, I have all the equipment, like I have all the lights and the whole setup and everything, but I just take it to shoots and I never end up using it. So I would think like people don't think as highly of me because I'm just using my camera. Like literally that's it. So I was really self-conscious about that, about the fact that I wasn't using all the fancy stuff. And then this mentor of mine was like, well, what if that is your superpower, that you just show up with yourself and your camera? And I'm like, oh yeah, that is. So once I decided like, this is actually how I do things and I don't need to lug around all my stuff. Obviously for some shoots, I definitely do if it's needed, but if we've got sunshine and a place to sit, that's all I need. So I think that having confidence in the way that you do things and not comparing yourself to other photographers takes a lot of stress off the table.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I think that's so important for people to hear that, you know, you don't need to dump loads and loads of money into the most expensive gear. You know, there are things that are more important than that. And really owning your process, like you said, is going to help you be a better photographer. And I also love what you were talking about with, you know, if you want to be a portrait photographer, you have to get in front of the camera too. I'm sure people listening to this have heard me tell them that as well. And, you know, it can be very hard, but it's so true. I mean, you're basically a hypocrite if you're telling someone like, oh, just do this. It's, you know, it's natural. It's fine. You know, if you haven't done it yourself and you haven't gotten in front of that camera and seen how, you know, scary it can be. And then you can relate to people more through that. You know, you can really understand what they're experiencing in front of that camera. And then when you're building up your own confidence in front of, you know, being able to be in front of the camera, it's like it goes both ways. You know, you help others to build up their confidence and you build up more confidence for yourself being a photographer. So I think that's just so cool. I think you've really figured out some really amazing ways to be able to connect with people and bring out the absolute best in them that shows up in their photographs. So kudos to you for that. We're almost out of time here, so I wanted to make sure that if people want to check out your work and see more of what you do, can you let us know where the best place for them to go to find you?
Yes. You can find me at badasswomenphotos.com, and my email is just regina@badasswomenphotos.com, and Instagram also badasswomenphotos. So
that's pretty easy.
Pretty easy. And then my full name on Facebook. So
okay, great. Well, we'll post some links in the comments when we go through and post this up for everybody to see, and make sure that people can reach out to you and see all the amazing work you do. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. It was so amazing getting to talk to you.